Calling all misfits, rebels, leaders, and teachers, welcome to the one place where the only way to fit in is by standing out, where big goals are met with even bigger action, and where we talk through then tackle all things entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Kelsey Knudsen, and this is the Get Shit Done podcast. Welcome to the Revolution. Unpopular opinion, your employee isn't lazy or bad at their job. They may just not know what you actually want from them. Today, we're talking about why you need to clarify what good means, why you need to understand it, and why your team needs to understand it, and how some of your less optimal employees may surprise you with this one shift in your business. So here's the deal. This story comes to you from true experience. I've audited many a business in my time as a coach, and I realized this gap between business owners thinking that people should, quote unquote, just do the right thing or just do it right or just do a good job versus employees not actually knowing what that means. I am going to say, if you lay out the red carpet, you have the conversations, you're clear, and they still are missing the mark, that is a completely different episode. And there are definitely people I've helped let go. So this is not to say everything is rainbows and butterflies and that everything is our fault as business owners. No. But I will say, sometimes I walk into a business, sometimes I do a team training, sometimes I have a gut feel that someone is underperforming and not a fit. We roll out expectations, and sometimes people surprise me. So this episode is for those people. Here's the problem. If you don't know what good means, your team doesn't know what good means. Period. Which manifests in a way of them doing something and all of a sudden you're annoyed or frustrated, or they do something and you aren't sure why, but you think it's awesome and you celebrate it. And especially when you have multiple team members, you're going to notice these differences. You have a preference. You have things you like and you don't like. And if you don't articulate them, not only for yourself, but to your team members, it's hard to course correct. And that's what this episode's all about. I'm going to equip you with 5 tools that I think are crucial to helping your team get on board and also for you to establish what that even looks like. So here is how it looks in business to not know what good means. How about revenue? What is good revenue? What is good for a launch? What is good profit? What is good when it comes to engagement on a social media post? Do we even care? What is good for a client experience? You can see if you don't create some kind of way to be specific with each of these things, it could be incredibly vague. Maybe I'm going to pick on social media. It's my favorite thing to pick on. But maybe you're like, man, we're just not doing good on Instagram. But what if you're getting tons of people leaving comments, sharing it with friends, messaging you because of the stuff you're putting out there? Maybe you're not getting a lot of likes, but what does good mean? And that's such a great example of how we need to get more specific than just saying we want to do better, right? We want to be specific because then we can measure specific, we can pass on specific, and that can help us get to the next level of business. And level for me, just to clarify, means opening new locations, hiring more team members, profit sharing with your employees, adding new avenues of revenue into the business. So that's what I mean by level. It's specific, right? All that to say, it starts with this clarity piece and it trickles down from there. But I'm going to break it down into 5 easy bite-sized nuggets for you because I want you to really take this and run with it. I think it's going to be crucial and game-changing, especially for your team. So the first thing is this. When you're thinking of that lazy employee, this is not the only culprit and it's not the only indication that you have this wrong. But it's the one that I think stands out the most. It's that person who's, just on the teeter-totter, and some days they do okay at their job, meaning you're not annoyed. And some days you go to bed and you're like, oh my gosh, I really need to read the email they sent. I'm not confident in what they wrote. If you're feeling that way about a team member, the rest of this episode is dedicated to you. The first thing I want you to do is actually fully and 100% something you as the business owner have to be the one to do. I want you to define what good means in your business. I call these key performance indicators. I did not come up with that term. It's common business jargon, but essentially it's what can we measure to show growth in the positive direction we want to head. And not only are we aware of what we're measuring, but we have goals tied to those specific measurements. For instance, if we're measuring how much cash we made this month, but we never set a goal, how do we know if that is good better, best. There's so many vague words. How can we be specific and know and have that clarity to be like, hey, we're headed in the right direction? And that's also where I think before you even start tracking this stuff, you need to know where you're headed. You need to know what that next level is. You're here because you have some kind of goal in mind. I want you to make sure you write that down before you listen to the rest of this episode, because having that in mind will help indicate the rest of the next steps I lay out for you. So the first one, again, to recap, is to identify what good means in the business. I call these key performance indicators, and they are a combination of not only numbers and quantifiable data that you track, but also qualifiable data. If you want to create a culture that is more workplace balance oriented, that is for, I don't know, like the working mom, maybe that's a huge priority to you. You really need to pay attention to how morale is. You need to pay attention to how work-life balance is looking for your team members. You need to pay attention to other things besides just numbers. And I think this applies for any business and any goal. It's a mix of the two. You need both. But I'm going to give you some examples because I think that's helpful. These are KPIs we are currently tracking in my business like today. So this may be helpful for you. Number one would be number of podcast downloads. I'm not shy about it. I recently revamped my branding. I moved, so we have a new setup here. And like I said, she's a work in progress. I also have a new team who's editing this episode and handling my social media. Guess what? They're contractors, but they still work on my team, which means we need to have KPIs we're tracking. So we're tracking number of podcast downloads. If that number is not increasing each month, and there's a grace period as we're getting into flow together, but if that number is not increasing each month, then we need to take it a step further and decide what adjustments do we need to make in the setup, in the format of the episodes, in the release times and dates, in topics that we cover. There's so many things we can do, but tracking that data will help us know, hey, we're onto something, or hey, we need to make some adjustments. Another KPI we're tracking is number of discovery calls booked versus how many clients are signed. Because here's something, if I am not getting potential clients to book discovery calls, that is a marketing issue. If I'm not converting them to book into my services, that is a sales issue. Both solutions kind of stem from me as the CEO of my business, and it's good to know which problem is truly happening, because if my marketing team is helping me get more clients to book discovery calls, but I'm not closing them, that's a sales issue. And guess what? I get to go to sales boot camp. I get to go spend more time and energy improving that muscle or figuring out where they're dropping off and why. And that 100% falls on me. So that data is super important. We also track revenue. Of course, I don't shy away from the financials. And now we're really trying to track profit. That's something in the past we weren't as studious about, but it's a number I'm very curious about. I'm really growing and focusing on having a profitable business and having that be a part of my financial health as well. So those are just some examples of KPIs. And again, the buck starts with you. If you don't know this for yourself, how can your team members know this of you? So I highly encourage you, even block off a full day where you sit and you're like, what numbers are going to help me understand the health of my business overall? And then we're going to dive deeper from there. So step number 2 is this. I want you to create a place that the overall business has access to these KPIs. I will say the financial stuff, I totally understand how there's some team members that may not be a fit for that data, and that's totally fine. But all that to say, some kind of hub or dashboard where that stuff is visible. And I think it's important to talk about it. I have a business owner who has a team. She's been in business, I think she's close to 10 years, but she didn't share financial data for a long time because she was just worried about how that would make people feel, and she didn't know that they needed to know, and just really wrestled with it. But the more transparent that she's been able to say, hey, overall on paper we're doing well, but efficiency wise, it's actually costing us some things here and here and here. By sharing that data, it actually helped the team get on board to create solutions for that problem. Because revenue is not the be all end all. Revenue is how much cash is coming in the door. Profit is how much is left after you spend money, right? I think we should all become profit obsessed personally as business owners. I'm not a tax professional, but I think it's important to have profitable businesses. And all that to say, you can have on paper a successful business, but you could be outspending what you should be each month. And this is where this really comes into play. So make sure you have a place where you're tracking this data. It starts to tell a picture over time. And like I said with my team, if our podcast numbers go down the first couple episodes, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's their fault. That's why. It takes time to get into a rhythm and a flow. We moved platforms. I'm changing the format of something. Like a lot of changes happen. So I kind of expect a settling, if you will. And all that to say, the story that data tells over time is really interesting to me. It's not so much what does this month say. It's like I'm tracking month after month. Am I seeing that growth? Am I seeing it head in the right direction, or do we need to recalibrate and make some changes? So make sure you have it in a place the team can see. If not that, at least have it be something you reference in, I don't know, your team meetings we talked about last episode. If you didn't listen to that one, definitely recommend taking a peek at that episode. But I did talk about how important it is to share with your team, the overall company, what's working, what's not. And this is where that comes into play. Once you have that kind of home base for this, and again, maybe the financials are somewhere else, maybe it's everything but that, that's fine. Just make sure you have a way that you're consistently sharing with your team so they know what's going on. The number 3 I want you to do is this. Not only do you have KPIs created for the overall business, you should have them for each one of your team members as well. And this one's tricky because in certain industries, it's really easy to track. I'm totally going to share my bias. I come from the hair world. We love our data. It may surprise you, but a lot of hairstylists I know are obsessed with how many clients did we see? What's our projection for the rest of the month? How many people bought retail? What was their retail percentage? What was their rebook percentage? Which is great. That industry has a lot of easy data we can track to see and understand consumer behavior and make changes as a business owner. Not all industries are like that, and I understand it. However, I think it's important when you bring people on your team, and I feel this way whether it's a contractor, a 1099, or a W-2, or someone who is salaried. I don't care the format. I think you need to have some level of conversation of what expectations are and some goals that you're measuring, because you may be quote unquote feeling like they're not doing a good, there's that word again, job, but maybe the number shows otherwise. So maybe the issue isn't so much their performance. Maybe it's just their energy or how they show up or their personality fit in conjunction with the business. And maybe that's a different kind of conversation you get to have with them. So make sure you have a set of KPIs you have created for your team members. I'm a huge fan of having those team members be a part of that creation process because they may have personal goals within your company that they're aiming towards. A great example I can think of, I have some clients in the aesthetic space, right? And they have a team of managers. Managers are not taking care of clients, but maybe they have goals of the team of people underneath them. Maybe their goals are for overall profitability of the business. Maybe their goals are more social media specific and they're really fixating and focusing on that. Have your team members bring their goals to the table and then think of what numbers you can track. Don't be lazy and just copy paste what Instagram or Meta spits out at you. That's not what I'm saying. Don't just go to your POS and be like, run report, and then just look at it blankly. This is putting thought and effort and intention behind the data you're tracking and doing it in a way, it should be a quick snapshot. It should be a way where you're quickly able to be like, ooh, we're doing great in the marketing side of things. We need to beef up the sales. And I mentioned earlier how I do that. Or maybe it's like, hey, we brought on a new team member who specializes in Pinterest. We're really going to focus our data tracking on Pinterest, not only on the application and how much you're growing there, but maybe we want to also track how much conversion we're having over here. So you can see how this KPI stuff can be really tailored to each specific role within your company. And again, I highly encourage you to have your team members be a part of the conversation. And I just think it makes it more powerful. They're going to buy into it easier as well. And they may think of things that are not on your radar. So beyond that, I also think it's important for you to go over these numbers consistently. Now, I mentioned also in last week's episode how important one-on-one check-ins are. This is where this comes to play. So if your team members help create those KPIs and you're tracking them, you can say things like, hey, we will check in every month. And if you consistently hit your goal, I don't know, 3 months in a row, maybe that is where you can negotiate a pay bump, or maybe they could have an additional paid day off, or maybe they can have some kind of bonus. There's things we can do to incentivize accomplishing these goals. And it really comes back to having them be a part of the process. And that consistency will tell you what you can and cannot afford. I think something I also noticed pretty recently is how important it is to have that kind of growth plan for your business. Like, do you want to do this thing forever in this way? Do you want to sell it down the road? Do you have aspirations of having a team member take it over? Do they know that? You know, there's so many opportunities for us as entrepreneurs. And it's amazing and beautiful to get to the place we're at, where we're established, things are good, things are working, things are consistent. But there's also this piece of it where you have choices. You have choices of how you want to grow it and scale it and pivot and adapt and adjust. And I think it's important to identify what those are. And then that consistency piece can help you in making sure you are headed in that direction or not. I also think it's important to have constructive conversations around these KPIs, not only one-on-one in those meetings, but as an overall business. Maybe the overall business, again, like I said, maybe revenue's growing. You're consistently getting more and more clients. Your team is growing. You're further and further removed from the day-to-day operations, and you're really stepping into your CEO role that your business needs you to own, and you're doing that. But maybe you're tracking the data and you're realizing, wow, as the revenue is going up, so are our expenses. And maybe that's a conversation with the team. And part of it is they may not know the parameters, or maybe it's time for the overall business to raise prices. There's so much data that comes from establishing these things. And that way you're able to operate your business from facts and not feelings. And I think that's super important. All right, so we talked a bit about going over numbers consistently. We talked about having constructive conversations. And I also think it's important for you to lay out these expectations, this KPI data that you're tracking in that same conversation should be the conversation around expectations with the team members too. And then the last piece is to make sure that you are hitting those numbers. And you need to make sure that if you're not, or someone specifically is not performing at that level, you have conversations. And now you have something you can reference. So to circle back to the beginning of this episode, when you're like, gosh, that employee is just so lazy, they're always running late. And now you have this conversation. And part of it is telling them exactly when to show up and the repercussions for if they don't. Now you have something you can lean back on. And I think that is crucial. To be clear is to be kind. One of my friends said that recently, and I thought it was so good. But I just want to remind you that they can't read your mind. And you know what is good and what is not good. You have this intuition. You have this feeling of what feels like, hey, let's celebrate that. That's awesome. Or, hey, that's frustrating or not the way I would do it. There's something in your brain that is happening that's telling you that. So this is just your reminder to sit, document it, create a place where there's understanding, not just for your own brain, but also for your team as well. And I think it's important to just note that these KPIs, they're different per industry. They're different per season in business. I love revisiting KPIs and updating them when you make changes in your team. If you were to have helped clients merge locations, that's a great time to revisit KPIs. I've had clients open locations. That's another great time to update those KPIs. So for the person who's like, Kelsey, just give me the checklist of all the things I should track. I have some thoughts and opinions of baseline, what everyone should have kind of top of mind. But beyond that, it has to be tailored to you, and ultimately look at it from the lens of what can help you make informed and confident decisions in your business to really help you grow the revenue, hire that new employee, or open that new location. So all that to say, I really hope you take this episode and run with it. Remember these 5 steps. I'm just going to repeat them again so you have them in the back of your pocket. It's identify what good means for the overall business, creating your own system of KPIs and data you are tracking. I want you to also remember to put it in a place that your team can access. I understand if maybe finances have to be in a different place, that's fine. Number 3, create KPIs for each team member. Make sure they're a part of the process for extra credit. I think it just goes so much further. Number 4 is make sure that you're tracking your numbers consistently and look at patterns over time versus just 1 month independently. And then the last thing, make sure you're hitting those numbers and you're having conversation if you're not. It's up to you. If you have a team member who is crushing it, guess what? That's on you. Maybe you come up with a profit sharing option. Maybe you find a way to help celebrate that person, a next level of leadership they can tap into. These are all the little nooks and crannies of business that get avoided and they get dusty and dirty. And this, in my opinion, this is why good people leave. And these are people you may not even realize is good. And I was humbled. I went into a coaching experience with a quote unquote employee who was rough and just not a good fit. And I came out and realized how much of a rock star they are. They just did not understand what was expected of them. and they were intimidated to ask. And that's the reality. These people who work on your team, they are not entrepreneurs for a reason. There's something in you that has this passion, this drive, this confidence, this fearlessness, this willingness to just go for it. Just because you're wired that way does not mean your team is wired the same way. And they may have 9 out of 10 of those things, but that last one, that is the difference between an entrepreneur and an employee, and that's okay. We all need each other in this world, especially in small business too. And I just really want you to go into this exercise, if you will, confident, clear, and ready to define what good means. If you can't answer the question of what does good mean for the overall business, for that launch, for your revenue, for your marketing, for that employee, how are they doing a good job? If you can't clearly answer that question, it needs a KPI. So all that to say, KPI or die, I feel firmly about it. I hope this episode helped you out. If you're listening and you're like, I am so resonating with this. I am tired of feeling frustrated with my team and wondering if it's a me problem or a them problem. If that's you, please reach out. I have a few coaching spots left for the entire year. Best way to do that would be Instagram at Kelsey Marie Knudsen. I would be happy to have a conversation. You are worthy of having a business that feels supportive and empowered and having team members that truly have your back. And I think this one shift can be a big piece of the puzzle. So hope you got something out of this week, and I will catch you next time. Hey, thanks for being a part of the Get Shit Done Revolution. My hope is this episode sparked a fire in you, equipped you with some practical next steps, or inspired you to take action towards your goals. If it did, please help spread the word by sharing this episode or leaving a review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're tuning in. Now it's time for me to hand over the keys and let you get shit done.